We have three presenters today. Michael Royster. I think that just for the sake of remembering everything, we'll go one by one. He is from the Division of Social Work, Behavioral and Political Sciences at Prairie View A&M University. He's an elder and pastor in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. And the title of his presentation is Black Liberation Theology and White Evangelicalism, Reconciling the Ecumenical and Cultural Dissent.
All right, let me begin by just acknowledging in conjunction with the theme. One of the great challenges is that there is already enough inter-religious strife and turmoil and dissent as there is. But not only inter-religious, but it's also intra-religious, where you have the same faith but still much dissent. And so right now, and at least not just in the United States, but worldwide, Christianity is the largest religion in the world and in the US, or at least by affiliation. And Christianity contains such great amounts of dissent and diversity. And that in other words, there's so much diversity within Christianity that some of the subgroups may not consider many of its other subgroups as authentically Christian or really Christian. Yet Christianity in the United States contains culture war, or it embraces culture wars, ethnic dissent, polarization, and also ethnocentric public discourse laced with violent rhetoric in coded language. Beyond denominationalism, Christianity in the 21st century, contains ideological oppositions ranging from black liberation theology, or at least its remnants, which tends to encompass an alliance of urban, educated, middle and sub-middle class, socially, economically, and politically progressive African Americans with a more this-worldly theological point of reference. And then also there is moderate to liberal mainline Christianity, which contains a degree of toleration and acceptance for such groups, not so much based on race, but on social issues ranging from civil rights to domestic economic justice and also world peace. But then there's also white evangelicalism, which tends to encompass an alliance with, at least geographically, Southern culture and Midwestern, rural, and even suburban middle class and blue-collar working class, social and political conservatives with a more otherworldly theological point of reference. But in some cases, such groups have an alliance with African American theological conservatives with an apolitical focus. And below the surface, there are two major camps, or two major extremes. And there lies elements of xenophobic tendencies, which transcend religious institutions and into the polarized social and political realm. Now let me begin just starting off with African American liberation theology. Way before it was even coined a term, several centuries prior, it traces its roots to being born within the context of involuntary diaspora, where traditional religious expression was banned and forbidden. And the inherited religion was embraced only in part, but never totally resonated. And so something new has been created, a sort of form of syncretic belief system. And also, this same camp was birthed out of resistance from its inception all the way even to the very day to the present. And even within this same tradition, not all, I'm going to use some colloquialism here, African American religious expression and their adherents all drink out of the same cup. It is safe to say that there are at least 5 clear-cut, identifiable eschatological trajectories. In other words, what determines why people act or behave the way they behave is based on what they believe the final outcome, or what we call maybe the promised land, or the final destination, or what they believe in. So of these 5 basic eschatological trajectories within even the progressive black church can be broken down into 5 categories. One would be egalitarian assimilation, which simply means that that it's the belief that equality is possible, but the best route to get there is through assimilation. Assimilation entails give a little, take a little, become as acceptable as possible. Say no controversy, say no harm, and colloquial language, don't start none, won't be none. Just do what you got to do just to get along. Now, then there is the spiritualized, that there is no hope for any kind of racial reconciliation in this world, but you have the next world to look forward to. So just accept your lot in life right now, in the here and now, and if you are a good and faithful servant, then after you die, then that's when justice and tranquility will occur. Then there's another type within the same branch. We can refer to this as repatriation. It's the belief that there is a way to achieve equality, but you can't do it here in the United States. So you must go back to your homeland. Because Zion is over there. Well, please pardon me, I've never traveled to Liberia, I've never traveled to Ethiopia, but even if it is Zion, well, it's safe to say, maybe not right now it isn't. And so, but that's what repatriation refers to, that we were founded in the context of diaspora, and so you can actually get there and achieve equality, but you have to leave here and go back to your place of origin. And in fact, in the context of America, wherever that place may be. And then there's a fourth one, secessionism. There is a place right here in America, but it is separate from mainstream America, might we say. That means become your own independent nation within the much larger nation. And then, of course, the final one is nihilism. It's a way of buffering, or it's a way of coping. And so it's, in this case, it's the belief that any kind of effort is pointless, so you just take care of the here and now, and nothing else actually matters. Now, of course, these are all simplified just for time's sake. But even now, if we look at white evangelical Protestantism, which is another extreme, it gets even more extreme than both. For one, it is a Protestant subculture. It's more to it than just simply a religion, but it's also a Protestant subculture. Let's back up a tad bit. The White Citizens Council has Protestant roots. The Southern Christian Leadership Council also has Protestant roots. They're both equally Protestants, but very socially distant. Now let's come back to white evangelical Protestantism. Once again, the religion is one thing, but it's also a subculture. Oftentimes it is confused and fused with fundamentalism. They are very similar in some ways, meaning an embrace of inerrancy and to some extent infallibility. They are both embrace doctrinal purity The difference is fundamentalism may also have some separatist tendencies, meaning that the best way to practice and live is to separate yourself from the world, whatever that world may be, and however that may look. But also what they both have in common is that they're both a response to the challenges of modernity. One of the things that challenges modernity, of course, is plurality. And so without having to actually deal with plurality, whether it's racial plurality, religious plurality, it is a way of saying we refuse to deal with plurality, so we've got our own answer to that. There's a tendency of being apolitical, colorblind, and also, and the best way to deal with the problems of racism and all the other isms is to acknowledge that they were socially constructed. So if it's socially constructed, when in actuality it's aristocratically constructed. And then when something is aristocratically constructed, because when you say socially constructed, everybody can construct it. Aristocratically constructed basically means those who have power constructed, and those who have less power must follow the rules. And so by saying that, that means if you just ignore it, then it goes away, when of course it doesn't go away, and it hasn't gone away. When it does go away, somebody please let me know when that happens. But if we, now I just gave some snapshots of the two, and so they have two different things that they deal with. And so when you put the two together, they both have to deal with, they're both extremes, but then even in between, they still form there are still different alliances. There is social distance, polarization, and then even if it's not explicit, there are undercurrents. Undercurrents refers to the things that we talk about when nobody else is around, but except for when you're amongst yourselves. And then also, tolerance, of course, is one thing, because it is safe to say that we are at a stage where there is religious tolerance. And also it is safe to say that there's ecumenical tolerance. But it is not safe to say that we have reached religious respect, mutual respect, or ecumenical respect. So you can have tolerance, but that doesn't mean you respect those who are the other, whatever the other entails. So in other words, the great amount of dissent is oftentimes disguised by political correction, by what we can say is a form of positive peace. So, okay, with wrapping it up in 5 minutes or less. All right, let's just look at the rhetoric first of all. There is something called PC, political correctness, when it comes to dialoguing and interacting with one another, especially if we come from any kind of extreme. Political correctness, it has some advantages and disadvantages. Of course, what political correctness boils down to is if we're going to deal with racial dissent or any other kind of xenophobic tendencies, it boils down to a nice, friendly conversation or a dialogue, but it prevents a brutal confrontation about the real problems that exist. So that is one of the challenges of political correctness. But on the flip side, let's just say that is if we go for the brutal confrontation. Oftentimes it is laced with or framed as exercising First Amendment rights and freedom of speech. Well, freedom of speech is a great thing, especially when it comes to the dialogue across any kind of grounds. But also, one of the things that comes with freedom of speech oftentimes is a loss of civility. And so, as I try to wrap this up, what can be done and what is being done? Well, yes, there is the existence of many ecumenical coalitions and movements. There is the existence of interfaith dialogue. Some of the traditional prescriptions and remedies is to make friends across the aisle. Stand together. But making friends and standing together, that's the easy stuff, which is very vague. And it does nothing to do with restructuring not only society or restructuring the nation, or even trying to work with ideas and information, because one of the functions of religion is also to not just expressing a faith, but also one of the functions of religion is also to cultivate ideas and information. Legislation has an important role to play, but even beyond legislation, one of the great challenges that is very highly suggested is if restructuring is going to take place, the first thing that has to begin is for the masses on both sides and even in between to become conscious that there is even subliminal xenophobic tendencies. Because without being conscious, then no one can admit that we have a problem. And after admitting that we have a problem, that is the next step to lead to just even apologizing to those who are hurt. And before an individual can step back and say, well, I had nothing to do with 200 years ago, and I also had nothing to do with 50 years ago, and even what's going on today, I have nothing to do with that as well. Well, there's still something called collective guilt. I can easily, passively reap the benefits of somebody else's misfortune. And then also, the apology is the next step. But then even before that, in other words, just to begin the process of healing, there's a huge difference between healing and curing. All right, curing means the problem is gone. Healing means that we're working on it and it's in progress. I'll stop at this point.